A common problem we see in runners is that they have difficulty developing or maintaining stiffness in their Achilles. Why that's a problem is because if you can't develop that stiffness in your Achilles or your foot, your ankle and your foot end up going through too large a range of motion when you run or when you change direction. Going through too large a range of motion in an uncontrolled range of motion leads to other issues like tibialis posterior tendinopathy or even flexor hallucis longus tendinopathy. You can even develop ankle impingement issues from that or potentially plantar fasciitis. So for runners especially, Achilles stiffness is key. One of the major problems we see is that folks are underloading the Achilles or improperly loading the Achilles. My least favorite technique that I see people demonstrate way too often is in an attempt to tie in the foot, the Achilles, and the hip together, they'll get into either a bridge or a hip thrust position like so. And they'll raise their heel off the ground in an effort to isometrically target the Achilles. And they'll go through either the bridge or the hip thrust. The problem here is that in this position, the lever arm is way too long, meaning the actual force being applied is way too far from the Achilles. And so the calf and the Achilles don't have to work nearly as hard. The bottom portion of your calf, the soleus, handles up to 8 times your body weight when you run. If you're working it with that long lever arm that I just demonstrated, you're not taxing it nearly enough. It is not adequate to produce the adaptations that you're looking for. So we need a series of progressions in order to load the Achilles properly so that you can develop stiffness where it's necessary and in the positions that it's most relevant to your sport, running. So let's look at some of those. One of the first drills we use to help a patient tune into their foot and Achilles stiffness while also connecting with their hip is just a simple isometric wall push. They're going to place themselves against a wall or a shut door. Ideally, their arms are fully extended, but not required. And in this position here, we bring one leg up towards the wall. The heel comes up so that they're positioned squarely over the top of the ball of their foot. And in this position here, all I'm doing is pushing my foot in the ground to try and help push the wall over. My knee is mostly straight, softly bent, and I'm just driving that energy into the wall. Another possible progression is just a simple, heavy isometric calf raise. We're positioned here where this top foot can just produce a little bit of balance. I'm not putting any pressure through this leg at all. And all I'm doing with this barbell on my back is getting up to the ball of my foot. My heel is just 1 to 2 inches off the ground. And again, I'm using this top leg just as balance. And I'm going to hold here, starting at 20 seconds, working my way up to 45. Working to keep my heel about the same distance from the ground so that it doesn't drop or doesn't rise. And I'm trying to move as smoothly as possible, keeping my nose over my belly button and not letting my shoulders shift too far from side to side. Once we've checked all of these boxes with really excellent control, we can start jumping and hopping a little bit. In many cases, we try to use a jump rope, but if the coordination is too high a task for the individual, then we'll just have them hop. When we initiate jump rope, we like to ask folks to keep it really nice and light and to spend as little time on the ground as possible so that their feet aren't going through large ranges of motion, and neither are the rest of their legs. The other thing we like to do to challenge this task once they've got it is to slow down the tempo. And you can see that's not always the easiest thing to do. And again, if the coordinated skill of jumping rope and hopping in a cadence are too difficult, then we'll have the person simply hop. If we can get the individual hopping reasonably well at different cadences, and we like the mechanics and they like the lack of symptoms, then we start to try and separate one foot from the other. Without putting one leg fully on an island, we initiate some scissor hops, like so. And again, if everything's going well, then we'll change the cadence. And we can also change the directions. Now, if that all looks well, we'll go to some single leg versions, starting nice and light and quick, slowing the cadence down, looking for a nice stiff leg, and also initiating some directionality to it on a north, south, east, and west. And if that all looks well and feels well, then we start single leg bounding. One of the last skills we develop in athletes who are looking to improve their foot and ankle and Achilles stiffness for their sport is single leg bounding. It is one of the highest order skills you have to develop as an athlete, no matter if you are an endurance runner, a basketball player, a tennis player, a rugby player, you name it. You have to have that Achilles and foot stiffness to be able to develop acceleration, deceleration, change of direction. So once we've done all these other tasks and built them up appropriately, we get to some single leg bounding. And what we look for is similar ground coverage from leg to leg and similar joint motion from leg to leg. We don't want the knee or the hip or the arms trying to take up for energy that isn't being developed by the foot and the ankle. So now that we've had a good chat about it, I hope you have a better understanding of how and why we need to be able to develop Achilles, foot, and ankle stiffness in our athletes, and what that progression might look like phase over phase over phase.